All right, so let's unpack this. I want you to cast your mind back, and we're not talking ancient history here, just to September of last year,
Hmm.
September 2025.
Oh, yeah. That was a rough month for the industry.
It really was. If you remember the headlines back then, the federal tax credits for electric vehicles had just expired,
Right.
and the sales charts started looking, well, a little chilly. The financial press seemed practically eager to write the obituary for the American EV market right then and there.
It was a very singular narrative, a lot of doom and gloom.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. The vibe was very much, well, it was a nice experiment, but I guess we're all just sticking with gas forever.
Because the assumption, the prevailing thought across the board was that the only thing propping up the electric market was the government handing out cash.
Mm.
Without that subsidy, the dream was over.
Right, the subsidy was the only lifeline. But here we are. It is February 19th, 2026, and we've got a new stack of reports on the desk today that completely, totally flips that script.
It's a massive contradiction. And that's exactly the paradox we're going to explore in this deep dive today.
So for our mission today, we are pulling from the brand new 2026 U.S. Electric Vehicle Experience Ownership Study. That's from J.D. Power.
The gold standard for this kind of data, really.
Exactly. And we're pairing that with some fantastic analysis from Torque News and Electric Cars Report. Because while the sales graphs might have taken a dip last fall, the people who actually own these cars seem to be living in a completely different reality.
They are. The headline today isn't about sales volume. It's about a massive, unprecedented spike in owner happiness.
And see, okay, that's the part that just didn't track for me initially. We see all these headlines about inventory piling up on dealer lots, right?
Right.
So when you tell me this new J.D. Power report shows peak happiness, it feels contradictory. Are these owners happy because the cars are objectively good, or is this just, what do psychologists call it, choice-supported bias?
Choice-supported bias, yeah.
Yeah.
Justifying the purchase.
Exactly. You spend 50 grand on a car, you kind of have to convince yourself you love it.
It's a totally fair question. You're wondering if this is just a psychological defense mechanism playing out on a mass scale.
Basically, yeah.
But the data here suggests something much deeper is happening. We aren't just seeing people check a box saying, I like my car. We are seeing a fundamental shift in loyalty behavior.
Okay.
According to J.D. Power, overall satisfaction among battery electric vehicle or BEV owners hasn't just inched up a little bit. It has hit the absolute highest level since they started tracking this index back in 2021.
Wow.
But here's the specific number that makes me think this isn't just a psychological bias. It's 96%.
96%. Wait, of what?
96% of new BEV owners say they would consider buying or leasing another fully electric vehicle for their next purchase.
That's incredibly high.
It's a landslide. If they were secretly frustrated with the charging or the range, they might tell a surveyor, I'm satisfied, just to save face.
Yeah. Sure, nobody wants to admit they bought a lemon.
Right. But they would not commit their next $50,000 to the exact same technology.
Right.
That 96% loyalty rate is basically unheard of in the auto industry.
That is staggering. So effectively, once you go electric, the door just closes behind you. You do not go back to gas.
You don't.
But I have to play devil's advocate here for a second. If we think back to, say, 2022 or 2023, early adopters were notoriously happy just because they were part of a movement.
Oh, absolutely. The pioneer spirit.
Exactly. They would forgive a ton of flaws, bad software, clunky charging, just to be on the cutting edge. So is this just that same group of fanatics driving up the score?
And that is the most fascinating distinction in this 2026 data. The analysis from Torque News calls this the shift from the honeymoon phase to long-term compatibility.
Honeymoon to compatibility. I like that.
Right. Because a few years ago, owners were tolerating bugs. They dealt with range anxiety and broken chargers because the tech was novel and cool. But this new data is different. The market has actually matured.
So it's not a novelty anymore.
Exactly. People aren't happy because it's a neat gadget. They are happy because the car is fundamentally working better than the gas alternative.
And crucially for you listening, this is happening completely without the federal tax credits now.
Yes.
Because that was the big fear, right? That without the rebate, the value proposition would completely collapse and people would hate the cars.
That's what Brent Gruber from J.D. Power calls incentive independence. The foundation of this market is now solid, purely based on performance. It's not about price breaks anymore.
So the product is actually standing on its own 2 feet.
Precisely. People are finding that the ownership experience itself, the quiet driving, the instant torque, The total lack of traditional maintenance is the reward. They don't need a check from the government to validate their choice anymore.
Okay, so if it's not the tax credit making them smile and it's not just blind, fanboy loyalty, what is physically different about the cars or the ecosystem right now?
It's the infrastructure. That's the biggest leap.
Because I remember the horror stories about public charging from just 2 years ago. I mean, charger anxiety was a very real thing.
Oh, it was the #1 barrier to entry.
You'd pull up to a station in the rain, the screen is cracked, it's out of order, or you need some random app you've never heard of to get it to work. Has that actually been fixed, or are people just sort of getting used to the pain?
The fix is very real. And this is probably the most critical data point in the entire J.D. Power study. Satisfaction with public charging availability has just skyrocketed.
Really?
We are talking about a 101-point increase for premium EVs
Wow.
and a 115-point increase for mass market EVs. And that's on a 1,000-point scale.
Wait, over 100 points in one single year? That is massive. Usually these consumer sentiment indexes, they move by like 3 or 4 points and analysts freak out.
Right, it's usually incremental.
So what caused a triple-digit jump? Did we just secretly build 1 million new chargers overnight?
Well, the overall infrastructure has steadily improved, yes. But there was one specific massive event that Torque News referred to as a seismic shift.
Okay.
It comes down to the NACS standardization. Do you remember the great adapter chaos of 2024 and early 2025?
Oh, vaguely. That was the whole CCS versus Tesla plug war, right? Where nobody knew what standard was going to win.
Precisely. You had drivers carrying around heavy dongles, buying third-party adapters, dealing with broken handshake protocols between the car and the charger. It was a complete mess.
It's just a total headache for a normal driver.
But that war effectively ended. Now that brands like Ford, GM, Rivian, and a bunch of others have native built-in access to the Tesla supercharger network, the entire range anxiety calculation has fundamentally changed.
Ah, so the walled garden finally opened its gates.
It did. If you are driving a Ford Mustang Mach-E today, you are no longer hunting for a random, broken third-party charger behind an abandoned mall. You have plug-and-play access to the superchargers. It completely removed the friction. When you take away that baseline fear of where am I going to fill up, you are just left with a car that's really fun to drive.
It's like if suddenly every gas station in the country started accepting your credit card when they refused to before. It just normalizes the whole experience for the average person.
Exactly. It makes it invisible.
But let's talk about the cars themselves for a second, because my uncle in Minnesota, he always used to say, EVs are great until January.
Ah, yes, the winter range drop.
Yeah, winter range loss was the absolute deal breaker for a huge chunk of the country.
And for a long time, your uncle was completely right. Back in 2022 or so, you might easily lose 30 or even 40% of your battery weight the second the temperature hit freezing.
That's a huge penalty.
Because the car was basically using resistive heating, which is essentially a giant electric space heater to keep the cabin and the battery pack warm. It was incredibly power hungry and inefficient.
And that's changed now.
Significantly. The 2025 and 2026 models largely made the switch to advanced heat pumps and much better thermal management systems.
How does that work differently?
They essentially scavenge ambient heat from the electric motors and the battery itself, and they pump that heat into the cabin. It is much more akin to how a refrigerator works, just operating in reverse.
Okay, so they aren't just burning raw electrons to generate heat out of nothing.
Correct. So the drop in range during winter isn't nearly as severe. Owners just aren't panicking when the temperature drops anymore. And on top of that, general vehicle build quality has gone way up.
Like the actual manufacturing of the cars?
Yes. The J.D. Power study specifically notes that in the premium segment, reported problems per 100 vehicles actually dropped by nearly 16 points.
That's a solid improvement.
We are seeing vastly better driver assistance systems, less exterior wind noise, and, thankfully, far fewer of those infamous panel gaps we used to hear about.
So the chargers actually work now, the batteries survive a Minnesota winter, and the doors don't rattle when you hit a pothole. It sounds like the electric dream has finally woken up and just gone to work.
That's a great way to put it.
But here is where I really want to push back on this whole all-EV narrative, because we have to talk about the hybrids.
Ah, the hybrid trap. This is a very crucial piece of the puzzle.
See, calling it a trap feels a little aggressive to me.
Yeah.
Let's look at last year. A lot of the big legacy automakers, they pivoted hard. They looked at the market and said, okay, full electric is maybe too scary for mainstream buyers right now. Let's go all in on plug-in hybrids. PHEVs.
Right.
It was supposed to be the ultimate bridge technology, and honestly, it feels like a safety net. If I run out of battery, I have a gas tank right there. Why is JD Power highlighting this as a problem?
Yeah, it certainly was the safe corporate strategy for the automakers. But the data from this 2026 study suggests it might have actually been a massive strategic blunder.
Yeah.
The PHEV owners are significantly less happy than the full EV owners. In the premium segment, plug-in hybrid owners are trailing full EV owners by over 110 points in overall satisfaction.
Over 100 points. That is a huge gap. But why is that? Is it just that the specific hybrid models are worse, or is it the actual ownership experience that's dragging it down?
It is entirely the ownership burden.
Yeah.
The expert analysis we're looking at describes the plug-in hybrid not as the best of both worlds, which was the marketing pitch,
Right.
but rather as the worst of both
The
worlds.
worst of both. How so?
Think about your normal vehicle maintenance schedule. With a hybrid, you still have oil changes, right?
Every 5 or 7,000 miles.
You still have transmission fluid flushes, you have spark plugs, you have a highly complex, often turbocharged gas engine that can fail. But on top of all that, you also have to deal with plugging the car in every single night just to get your 30 or 40 miles of electric range.
So you essentially have the hassle of visiting a mechanic and the hassle of managing charging cables.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Full battery electric owners avoid engine maintenance entirely. It's just gone.
Yeah.
PHEV owners don't get that benefit. And there's a behavioral aspect, too, that Torque News really hones in on.
What's that?
If you buy a plug-in hybrid, you usually end up really liking the electric driving mode. It's quiet, it's smooth, it has that instant torque.
Right. It feels futuristic.
But then your battery runs out and the gas engine kicks on.
And it feels clunky.
It feels like an immediate downgrade. Every single time that gas engine roars to life, it is a visceral reminder of the modern technology you could have had if you just went full electric.
Wow.
So that safety net you mentioned, it actually becomes a daily source of annoyance.
That is absolutely fascinating. So the legacy brands are essentially using these hybrids as a gateway drug, hoping to keep their traditional customers loyal to the brand while dipping a toe in EVs.
Yes.
But you're saying the gateway leads right out the door.
That is the ultimate risk they are facing right now. The customer falls in love with the electric part, grows to resent the gas part, and when it's time for their next car, they just go buy a full electric vehicle from someone else, usually a Tesla or a Ford. The hybrid strategy might literally be ushering their most loyal customers away from the brand.
That is a strategic backfire if I've ever heard one.
So, if the full EVs are the clear runaway winners in satisfaction, who specifically is taking home the gold medals this year? Is it still the usual suspects dominating the charts?
In the premium segment, the king has definitely reclaimed the throne. The Tesla Model 3 scored an 804 out of 1,000. It is firmly back on top.
So Tesla is still the heavyweight champ, despite all the legacy competition flooding the market.
They absolutely are. The Model Y and the BMW i4 were the very close runners-up, but the Model 3's combination of range, that seamless supercharger network integration we talked about, and their over-the-air updates just kept it ahead of the pack.
Right, because the car essentially gets better software while it just sits in your driveway overnight. Exactly. But in the mass market segment, we actually have a different leader this year.
Oh, don't tell me, is it the Mustang?
It is. The Ford Mustang Mach-E took the top spot in mass market with a score of 760.
Good for Ford, because I remember that car had a really rocky start with some big recalls a few years ago, but it seems to have really found its footing now.
It has completely solidified itself as the standard for the everyday mass market. It beat out the Hyundai Ioniq Q6 and the Kia EV9.
Now, that's huge.
It really proves that legacy automakers can win this game, but only if they commit to full electric and really nail the software.
Okay, so we have duply happy EV owners and surprisingly unhappy hybrid owners. But what does this say about the people still driving regular old gas cars? The ICE age, if you will. Because let's be real, most people listening to this are probably still driving gas.
And this is where the cultural shift is really starting to happen. For over a century, the gas car was the reliable standard. It was the sensible, safe choice.
Right.
But as EV satisfaction peaks like this, the broader public perception of the internal combustion engine is actively shifting. It's transitioning from the reliable standard to what analysts are calling the high-maintenance legacy option.
High-maintenance legacy. Ouch. That sounds like a very polite corporate way of saying obsolete.
In a practical way, it kind of is. Once a driver gets used to waking up with a full tank of electrons every single morning, never visiting a dirty gas station, and never having to schedule a Saturday morning oil change, going back to a gas car Literally just feels like adding chores back into your life.
Nobody wants more chores.
Exactly. The data clearly shows that once you go BEV, you rarely, if ever, go back to gas.
I want to touch on something else you mentioned in the notes before we wrap up the used market. Because if I'm a listener who hasn't bought an EV yet, my biggest fear, hands down, is depreciation.
Oh, absolutely.
We all saw used EV prices just fall off a cliff back in 2024. Is that free fall still happening?
No, that narrative has completely flipped here in 2026. Because owner satisfaction is so incredibly high, it's proving to the market that these cars hold up over time. So we are seeing the used market rapidly stabilize.
That's good news.
Those 3-year-old off-lease models for the 2023s and 2024s coming back to the dealers, now they are becoming absolute gold mines for smart buyers.
But how do you know the battery isn't just trash? That is always the fear, right? Buying a used EV feels like buying a used smartphone with a totally degraded battery.
And that was a valid fear.
Yeah.
But that's where the industry has really adapted. We now have battery health certificates that are becoming the standard requirement for used sales.
Oh, really? How does that work?
It means it's not a guessing game anymore. When you look at a used EV, you get a certified, standardized score on the battery's current degradation level.
That changes everything.
It's creating a firm floor for used prices because that kind of radical transparency just removes the risk for the buyer.
If I can see a certified piece of paper that says, 94% battery capacity remaining, I'm so much more likely to write that check.
Exactly. It completely transforms the used EV from a risky bet into a highly stabilizing value proposition.
It really sounds like we are entering a true virtuous cycle here. The charging infrastructure gets better, the cars get more reliable, the used market stabilizes. But I have to ask, where do we actually go from here? What is the outlook for the rest of 2026? Is it just smooth sailing all the way down?
Well, the momentum is undeniably there. The most exciting thing on the horizon is the launch of Generation 2 budget EVs.
Okay, define budget.
Chevrolet and Volkswagen are explicitly promising long-range BEVs hitting the market by Q4 of this year for around $25,000.
25,000, that is the magic number. That completely changes the game for everyday accessibility.
It really does.
Okay.
That demolishes the final affordability barrier.
Yeah.
But I do have to be the voice of reason here. There are still potential headwinds we have to watch out for. We cannot ignore the power grid.
Right, summer is coming up.
Exactly. We are looking at potential extreme summer heat waves in places like California and Texas. If we get rolling charging restrictions because the grid simply can't handle the air conditioning demand and the vehicle charging demand at the same time,
Right, that's a problem.
we could absolutely see a temporary but sharp dip in these sky-high satisfaction scores. It is the one piece of this infrastructure that is still a bit vulnerable to stress tests.
That's a very valid concern because honestly, it's going to be really hard to be happy with your shiny electric car if you get a push notification on your phone saying, please don't plug in your car until midnight.
Correct. But barring any major grid collapses, the trend lines right now are incredibly strong.
So let's wrap this all up. What does this mean for you, the listener? If you've been sitting on the sidelines, maybe watching those headlines about sales dips and thinking, phew, glad I didn't buy one of those things, you might want to seriously reconsider what those headlines actually mean.
Because the sales dip was largely just a temporary market adjustment. It was mostly due to pricing strategies and the tax credits vanishing. But the actual ownership reality,
Right.
it has never, ever been better.
Yeah.
The technology has genuinely matured.
It brings us right back to that whole idea of the safe choice. We usually think sticking with what we know the gas car is the safe bet. But if the supposedly risky choice, the EV, has a 96% loyalty rate and record-breaking satisfaction scores, maybe our definition of risk has completely changed.
And I think that is the perfect provocative thought to leave off on today. Is the era of the internal combustion engine ending not with a massive dramatic bang, but simply with a collective realization that it is just too much hassle?
Too much hassle. I really like that framing.
Okay.
Look, we know change is scary. Shifting your entire mindset from gas to electric is a big leap. But the overwhelming data from the people who have already taken that jump says the water is fine, actually. The water is great.
It really is.
We want to say a huge thank you to all of you for spending your time with us on this deep dive today. We know you have a million choices for where to get your tech and auto information, and we really, truly appreciate you choosing to hang out and learn with us.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for listening.
Until next time, stay curious.